Good morning and welcome to the fourth webinar on National Stimulus Proposal. My name is Simbiat Yusuf and I will be following along with this webinar, helping our wonderful moderator this morning, Jeanette Shaw. Attendees, we ask that you please submit all your questions through our attendee chat this morning, and we will get through as many as we can during the presentation. But do not worry, we will be sending follow-ups of our webinar slides and the presentation at the end of the webinar today. A little introduction to Fourth, who we are and what we do. Fourth, we are a nonprofit trade association advocating for smart, shared, and electric transportation through innovation, industry development, policy advocacy, consumer engagement, and demonstration. We are working to advance smart transportation. And you can find more information about Fourth, who we are, our membership program at our website at fourthmobility.org. A brief announcement, we have 5 webinars coming the week of June 15th through the 19th of 2020. These webinars are going to have 5 separate topics. On June 15th, we'll focus on equitable transportation electrification. June 16th, consumer engagement and EV adoption. The 17th, cities leading the transportation electrification charge with our sponsor ABB. June 18th, charging heavy-duty electric vehicles with our sponsor, again, ABB. And on June 19th, the final, electrifying TNCs. We hope you're able to join us for all 5 or one of the 5 webinars. We ask that you register, and we will send any recaps to you after the webinar as well. And a reminder that the National E-Mobility Equity Conference has been postponed, and that will be going on November 20th of 2020. If you would like any additional information regarding this conference or regarding our webinar, we ask that you find information on our website at fourthmobility.org. We have our wonderful speakers and moderator today. And with that, I will pass it along to our moderator, Jeanette Shaw, Senior Director of Policy at Fourth.
Thank you, Cindy. Hopefully all is well technology-wise. Look forward to moderating today's fabulous panel. And thank you very much to our speakers. And with that, as we all know, globally in the United States and around the world, we are facing unprecedented times. Many, many lives have been lost due to COVID-19, the pandemic, the unrest, the riots are occurring in our cities and worldwide. We are also realigning in ways that are having a profound effect upon us all, such as webinar conferences instead of in-person conferences, telecommuting. It's impossible to predict what will happen within transportation, but it is unlikely that the transportation system will be the same or remain the way it is today. We're going to hear from today's speakers on policy solutions and suggestion strategies needed to address job losses, small and big business failures, national security, global competitiveness and manufacturing, and our ability to reduce our vulnerability within health, environment, and in the marketplace. And with that, I'm pleased to welcome our first speaker, Robbie Diamond. Robbie is the founder and president and CEO of Securing America's Future Energy, otherwise known as SAFE. He's also president and CEO of the Electrification Coalition, a nonpartisan, not-for-profit business of leaders committed to promoting policies that facilitate the deployment of electric vehicles on a mass scale. And with that, Robbie, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Jeanette. Thank you, everyone, for having me, for listening to me. Also, thanks to my staff, Sue Gander, for putting this together. I will do my best to lay out the case, but also not steal everyone else's thunder as being the first speaker, because I think what's so heartening about the next presentations we're going to have is how much we all agree. And I think that's really a statement to what needs to happen in order to push electrification, but also use this as an opportunity to build jobs in America and position America for the future in the sense of manufacturing and everything else. I had a slideshow, which I think someone is supposed to put up. There we go. So Get America Moving Again. I hopefully that will make some people happy. It might offend others. I apologize for that. But we thought it was a way of really indicating what matters to the United States. And the thing about the United States, I'm going to the next slide. There we go. So before that, let me take one moment and talk about SAFE. So SAFE is really focused on the economic and national security risk. I will talk about supply chain risk, which others will talk about, but we see as incredibly important. We were founded as an organization that thought about oil dependence and how to reduce that. Electrification ultimately became the way to do that by diversifying our fuel sources to more than one fuel, so that the incredible volatility we see in the oil market doesn't drive our both foreign policy, economic decisions. And then started the Electrification Coalition that really works on deployment. I think many people on this call have worked with them, Ben Prohaska and his team. And we really work together to both work in the field to drive and accelerate the deployment, but also on the political aspect, hopefully speaking to a broad audience of people who care about both national security, economic security, and now supply chains. When we talk about Get America Moving Again, I think it's really important to lay out really how much we do move in the United States, in some ways even more than any other place. 26 million children ride school buses every day. 100 million commuters drive to work. 24 million people ride public transit. 2.7 million people in the United States fly over 44,000 flights, and 3 million truck drivers transport and drive goods over 500 million miles. That's before. And of course, it's no surprise that when we're not moving, when we're in isolation, over 40 million Americans are now unemployed. Nearly every one of those school buses is parked. Personal travel is down 46%. Really disconcerting about retail sales being down, but also auto sales and everything else, as you can see on this slide. So when we start moving again, I think one place we need to see, it will be a sign that our economy is growing. And I wanted to take a moment and talk about oil markets. We had a twin issue when it came to this pandemic. Not only did we see an incredible drop in demand, which lowered prices, but right at the start of the crisis, we saw Russia and Saudi Arabia collude with one another to drive the prices even lower. And I think that many times when things like that happen, we tend to talk about how its impact on the oil industry, right? There was a panic. How do we save the oil industry? But actually, I think it's really important to bring electric vehicles and other types of transportation technology into the picture and remind people that as those prices are dropping, Saudi Arabia and Russia don't only have the shale industry in mind, they have new technologies that will knock them out as being the sole transportation fuel. In essence, shale is a short-term annoyance to them, whereas electric vehicles are a long-term threat to their ability to make money and to drive their economies. And what's so great about electric vehicles is it's the stability in price, as you see from the bottom. And so any political leader, policymaker, and thinking about how do we end this roller coaster we've had over the last 50 years in oil prices, which has led to every major recession, one has to look at electric vehicles where you have this incredibly stable price, because volatility is really what hurts our economy more than anything else, that economic dislocation. As I like to say, one can run an airline at $150. One can run an airline at $20 a barrel. I'm sorry, a barrel, $150.20, but they're two totally different airlines. And so I think that's really important to understand why stability in price is really important. You get this diversification. I won't go into, everyone's seen the famous pictures of why we should be doing this. I mean, the idea that we wouldn't want clean air afterwards, like in some cases, yes, it is hard when you have to stop your economy, but here you don't even have to stop moving. We can move and have clean air. No brainer. The automotive sector, many people will talk about this, but as a national security and economic security organization, I would just say that the industrial base of the United States is premised on the auto industry. There's a reason that when ventilators and PPEs and other things were in short supply, We went to the auto sector to figure out how to get them to build this. There's a reason that in the World War II, they were the arsenal of democracy. And what we have seen, the hollowing out in many cases of this sector, and we got to make sure, as we'll get to in a moment, that they are on the leading edge in the technological revolution, or the United States will no longer maintain a privileged place of industrial. They are the place that is the innovation hub of manufacturing in the United States. So really important, both from the GDP they produce today and where the workers are, but also in thinking about our future. I saw in a future slide from another speaker, they will talk about where these jobs are. I will just say very briefly that it's not just where the jobs are today. I will point out that if one takes the point of electric vehicles all the way from minerals to markets, that whole supply chain, one begins to engage new states that aren't even on this map. Right. What I really think is from Minnesota, when it comes to nickel or graphite in Alaska, to the anodes and cathodes, to the new battery plants in Tennessee and Georgia, it is really important to point out to policymakers that they have a stake in this that they might not know yet. And we can provide those future jobs for them right away. So to us, there's always been this debate, why EV penetration is low, we shouldn't be doing this. This is not the way to take ourselves out of a pandemic. But in reality, not a question for us anymore if this will happen. And I think political leaders and policymakers need to understand that. The real question is where it's going to happen and who will control that supply chain. And I think that is a really powerful moment to be bringing that up due to the issues we had in pharmaceuticals and PPEs and other things. And I cannot think of a more powerful reason to be doing this, and especially the non-ideological, bipartisan nature of that very question. The automakers have really shown their $300 billion investment that this is where they're going, and we need to make sure that it happens here. Look, I just bring up this China question because I believe that this really gets at the heart of where our political moment is on both sides of the aisle. And right now, China exerts this incredible control over this entire supply chain from minerals to markets. 98% of all rare earth minerals and oxides are processed in China. 46 of the 70 gigawatt factories are going to be built there at the moment, and only 5 in the United States. Over 90% of cathodes are built there. And so it's really also not just about minerals, not just about processing, but really we have to begin to explain to people that it's about the cells, the battery packs, the cathodes, the anodes, and the semiconductors. And I think that feeds into exactly where both Vice President Biden wants to go, as well as President Trump. That is I think this is the greatest political moment to reframe EVs as not just about climate or other reasoning. So what did we put out in Get America Moving Again? We had a very broad plan, not just about electric vehicles, but about this advanced manufacturing, about the electric vehicles themselves. Many of the policies we talk about in electric vehicles, you'll hear from others. I will go through a couple, but really not all. But also tying together autonomous vehicles, new mobility, both shared and micromobility, and the grid modernization, so we can worry about the grid to the car as more and more of our transportation goes onto the grid. The national security threats matter more. It's not just about residential and industrial need for electricity, but also about our transportation sector for the first time, and this entire supply chain. Some of these things are very, very short term. Will create jobs, and some have a little bit more of a tailwind. But if you don't do them today, think of the jobs that won't be created in the future. And this is the moment to make that investment. This came out today. I think it's very this slide. When one looks at the penetration rate of electric vehicles, we have China leading at 5.1%, Europe's at 3%, and the United States at 1.9%. So we are behind. We are behind on the market side, And if you're behind on the market side, people who want to build that supply chain, create all those jobs, will be behind on that side too. So really, we can catch up. The amazing thing is the United States is really the richest country, not only in its financial institutions, innovation, but also in the minerals and other things that it has here. So there's no and national labs, university. So there's no reason we can't catch up, but we just need people to understand, why coming out of this pandemic, this is the place where we need to invest, or we'll have a serious economic threat in the future. Just to highlight a couple of these points, and then I will stop. Look, there is going to be the auto industry is as I said before, the largest GDP producer in any industrialized Western nation. They will never fail. They will not be allowed to fail. We saw that in 2008. And so what they want, and if there is somehow a clash for clunkers thing, the really important thing is to make sure that there's an EV component. That is not a natural given. So how do we work together to make sure that we are stimulating the EV side, not just the industrial side? I think that we've really put a focus on not just the light duty sector, which I think we all agree on what needs to happen, reforming the credit and making sure there are booster credits if there's any incentive to buy a vehicle, but also the ATVM, heavy duty, medium duty side. Not only should we be promoting the marketplace, but the ability to manufacture here. There's good policies on the books that with some changes could include medium and heavy duty. And clearly a huge amount of jobs can be created through the manufacturing sector. And then finally, one that's not on this list is this mineral side. So I do think it will take time to get some of the battery component pieces in place for the United States. But on the really, really high upstream, it is possible to create cooperatives, as we've proposed in our plans, where one can create rare earth minerals and process them in the United States. Rare earth is not because it's rare. It's just because it's very hard to get large amounts in the soil we have, and a cooperative can be set up. So anyways, I think that providing a fulsome plan on Get America Moving Again, EVs at its core, across the entire spectrum of vehicle types, but also across the entire spectrum from minerals all the way to the markets, is the way for us to move forward. There's never been a bigger need, but also a more powerful moment to do this for our workers, but also to message it for the politicians and policymakers who might not have thought about it in this way before. I will stop there. Thank you very much. I look forward to answering questions, and I really look forward to listening to everyone else's presentations.
Thank you, Robbie, for your insight and illustrating how we can get America moving again through creating jobs and strategies. And it sounds like there's a dog that also would like to have a voice or opinion within this webinar. With that, welcoming our second speaker, Genevieve Cullen. Genevieve is the president of the Electric Drive Transportation Association, also known as EDTA. It's based in Washington, D.C., but works across industry as a trade association promoting transportation electrification. She's been president since 2015 and previously directed the organization's policy and advocacy efforts. Genevieve, welcome.
Here I am. Sorry. Apologies. Jeanette, thank you so much for having me and having us. I think this is obviously a really timely conversation and a pivotal moment for national policy and for the electric drive industry. That we have some real challenges here, and finding solutions to them can also answer a lot of larger challenges the country faces, as Robbie pointed out. So I'm just going to, I don't think we need to belabor a great deal the fact that we all see that there are going to, aside from the massive human impacts of this pandemic, the economic impacts are revealing themselves. As we are seeing cascading through the EV markets and supply chain. It's not just demand destruction, but there is also supply chain disruption due to shutdowns globally and in the United States. So that's components and vehicles and that are changing the marketplace in the immediate term and have implications for the future. Obviously, the people are looking at the auto market and predicting it's going to be some time before it recovers. Morgan Stanley is saying, predicting a 30% decrease in car sales in 2020. And how this affects the electric industry is probably we are all watching and waiting to see. But at best, we will see that product launches are being delayed. Bloomberg New Energy Finance projects that EV sales will drop this year for the first time in the modern era. And they're also predicting that there's going to be a different in the recovery of the market. We're going to see it recover unevenly across the globe, with the U.S. potentially falling behind our competitor markets and competitor developers. And on the vehicle side, there also we get a lot of focus on. We can't forget that there's an enormous impact on the emerging infrastructure industry. Many of my members are in this segment, and they are reporting drops in utilization rates at their charging stations of 60%, and 70% of their charging stations under development have been delayed by shutdowns and shelter-in-place requirements. So as we look at where to go from here and how to ensure that this emerging industry can navigate these challenges, we're looking at policy recommendations that do three things. First is mitigate the immediate damage to demand and investment. Two, strengthen the electric drive value chain in the immediate and medium term, and then invest in a long-term comprehensive effort to electrify the transportation sector. So in the areas of immediate action, I think a lot of us on this call, and I think all of the presenters have looked across the array of existing programs to see what levers we can turn immediately that will create jobs, that will support investment in the industry and create and maintain help maintain our place in the global marketplace. And we have documentation that all of these are detailed in other places, but I'll be gentle with you and just highlight the program areas. The Department of Transportation obviously has its CMAQ programs and the low or no emission vehicle programs. The Department of Energy has state energy programs, Clean Cities. There is the Transportation Electrification Program, which was involved loans and grants for electric transportation projects that was created during the Recovery Act, and actually could just if you attach a fresh funding source could be revived. The Environmental Protection Agency has the DERA program, which, as Robbie rightly pointed out, is aimed at cleaning up the medium and heavy duty sector, and that also has been very effective. It's oversubscribed, and it has the ability to scale with more resources. There is also the RFS program at EPA, which includes a pathway to recognize renewably sourced electricity used in transportation. Right now, it's a very narrow pathway, and there are administrative challenges to making it work. But it is a possibility of an existing program that can be used to stand up the industry and create the jobs and additional macro benefits that we're all striving for. Obviously, in the tax policy area, there are a suite of electric drive incentives that all need, at best, a little updating in order to serve this changing market. They include the tax incentive for plug-in electric drive vehicles, the tax incentive for fuel cell electric vehicles, and the incentive for alternative fuel infrastructure. There are existing proposals to the Driving America Forward Act, of course, is the bill to update the plug-in and fuel cell credits that we've been working on for a while and working hard to support, and has a great deal of support on the Hill. There are also several proposals to update the Section 30C alternative fuel infrastructure credit that will extend that credit and increase its value so it actually works more effectively in this marketplace. And finally, to the long game, if we ever get to the point where we have a real infrastructure debate or focus on transformational investments as part of a stimulus package, we absolutely support a large-scale planning and investment in local, regional, and national transportation infrastructure. We also, on the vehicle side, we have to focus resources on light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles. That's both in developing technology and in U.S. manufacturing. This is an unbearably dense slide, but I'll just in overview explain that. So first, we need to make sure that infrastructure supports electrification of all electric drive cycles. So we'd like to see investment in interstate corridors, as well as a parallel investment in local and regional infrastructure. That's workplace and commuter and transit applications. Also, we need to absolutely invest in R&D. As Robbie pointed out, the challenges of supply chains and scarce resources. I think that part of the answer to that is we need to be investing in R&D to help to reduce, reuse, recycle, diversify all of the the component materials in the EV supply chain. Finally, we absolutely need to be investing in domestic manufacturing resources that will help us, people build where they sell, so we can reinforce not only investment in technology, but support consumer access to products and maintain leadership in a global market where we are in danger of slipping behind. Other countries have already noticed their intention to use their recovery policies to support green and clean technology, and we should be taking a similar look at that, or else risk absolutely losing our place in this global marketplace. And that being said, thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Genevieve. I think those proposals will certainly expedite the potential for not only job creation, but also ensuring that the EV industry, which is nascent, will continue. And look forward to welcoming our third speaker, Gina. Gina is the director at Sierra Club for Clean Transportation for All. And Gina joined the Sierra Club staff in 2010 to lead its electric vehicles initiative. So quite an expert and has been in this field for quite some time. Gina now directs the Sierra Club's broader Clean Transportation for All campaign, which is set to accelerate adoption of electric cars, trucks, buses, as well as defending strong clean vehicle standards and secure equitable policies. So with that, Gina.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Really happy to be here today and joined by wonderful colleagues at Forth, BGA, LACI, SAFE, and EDTA. Thank you for having me. I work for Sierra Club, which is the nation's oldest and largest grassroots environmental organization. And we've been working together with many colleagues in the EV space these past many years. So we all know that this is a painful time. It's a painful week. It's a painful era in our country right now. The racist violence, the pandemic, millions suffering and out of work and frustrated by the many injustices. I think it reminds us that not only can we do more than one thing at a time to address these challenges, but we must do that. Early in the EV advocacy arena, I had the experience, and probably many of you too, of hearing people say, well, we can't have people switch to EVs until we've fully cleaned up the electric grid. And I would say, as many of you would probably say, we can do it. We need to do both at once, right? EVs are already cleaner today. They will be even cleaner tomorrow as we continue to clean up our grid. But we really don't have the time to wait, right? Right now, the pandemic and our response to it is killing millions, killing thousands and putting millions out of work. Racial violence and structural racism is leading to a lot of pain and inequity that we've seen for generations. Lack of access to affordable, clean transportation is a reality for millions of Americans as well. And of course, meanwhile, climate change is bearing down upon us, right? So yesterday, hurricane season began for this year. Experts are warning that we should expect about 10 hurricanes this season, 6 of them potentially very major. And that's a more severe prediction than we saw 10 years ago due to climate change. And it's a less severe prediction than we will likely see in 10 years when my 2 children will be in their 20s. So I think it speaks to the fact that we really must be addressing all of these challenges at once. We don't have the time to waste. And really a bold, clean transportation stimulus package is one important way that we can do that. So various clean transportation networks came together recently, my organization only being one of them, to urge Congress to invest in clean transportation stimulus that totals not millions, but upwards of $100 billion or more. We wanted to send a signal that now is the time for bold action. And this letter was signed by more than 80 organizations representing environmental, labor, and health interests. And we recommended specific policies and programs that Congress can quickly scale up. So what does smart, bold investment look like? Our recommendations in the letter are in 6 separate categories that I'll briefly mention. So number 1, invest in at least $20 billion in domestic clean vehicle and parts manufacturing. Tens of thousands of Americans who work in clean transportation manufacturing have lost their jobs just in the last few months. And so we need to put them back to work. And so Congress can take a number of steps, and this includes expansion of the advanced technology vehicles manufacturing program. Number 2, invest $20 billion in EV charging infrastructure. We need more chargers along highway routes, at workplaces, at apartment complexes, etc. Think of the thousands of electrical workers who can install all of this infrastructure. Number 3, invest in $20 billion or upwards of $20 billion in electric transit and school buses. There are more than 540,000 transit and school buses that in normal times are transporting American children and adults every day, racking up billions of miles and emitting millions of tons of CO2 every year, other pollutants as well. Congress can expand programs like LONO and DERA, as Genevieve and Robbie both mentioned, to invest in programs like electric school bus expansion and electric transit bus expansion. Number 4, invest in the adoption of electric trucks. The pandemic has really made clear, I think, to all of us how much we rely on the shipping industry. Truck exhaust disproportionately affects people of color, low-income communities. Electric trucks don't emit any of the pollutants and that put people's health at risk. Congress should invest in several electric truck provisions that will greatly benefit communities, and these include business vouchers and tax credits. Number 5, extend the federal tax credit, as the 2 previous speakers also mentioned, to incentivize American consumers to make the switch to driving electric. And then number 6 is invest in public transit, right? I think we've all seen the news stories about how dramatically electric transit workers and riders have been influenced by the pandemic, as well as transit agencies in general. And so we've already seen some relief packages benefit transit agencies, public transit agencies. We need to see more of that. So number 1, provide at least $20 billion in immediate relief to public transit agencies. Number 2, waive the prohibition on using capital funds for operational expenses. Number 3, there's a major backlog. All these transit agencies need to make a lot of fixes at their stations, along their routes. There's upwards of $99 billion that's estimated that's needed. So start to address that backlog through a stimulus investment program. And then lastly, if stimulus includes highway trust fund investment, public transit should really receive something like 50% of those funds. Right now, it's only 20% due to an antiquated provision. And then finally, I wanted to call your attention to a new report that my Sierra Club colleagues released last week that provides analysis on all sorts of job growth opportunities that exist in clean energy, clean transportation, environmental cleanup, infrastructure. If we invest wisely, we can, through these kinds of investments, create something like 9 million family-sustaining American jobs. And there are a number of clean transportation provisions in this report, so I encourage this crowd to take a look at that report. So I'll stop there and look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina. And as a multitasker, I agree. I think the U.S. can do many more things than just one at a time, and creating up to 9 million jobs that would just catapult us past this economic downturn. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is Zoe Lipman. Zoe is the Director of Vehicles Advanced Transportation Program at the BlueGreen Alliance. Zoe is based in the Alliance's DC office, where her portfolio includes transportation, manufacturing, and similar related economic topics. And with that, Zoe, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, thanks very much. Sorry for the brief moment getting unmuted there and for the persistent video problems, but I will, hopefully my slides will be more interesting than my face in any case. Thanks so much for putting this together. It's been great to hear my fellow presenters and really look forward to the questions. As I said, as Jeanette said, I'm Zoe Lipman. I work for the BlueGreen Alliance. For those who are may not be familiar with BGA, we are a partnership of some of the nation's largest environmental organizations and labor unions. I'm happy to say the previous speaker, Gina from the Sierra Club and the United Steelworkers were our founding partners. Today, our partners represent millions of Americans across the labor and environmental communities. BlueGreen Alliance was founded around the idea that we don't have to choose between good jobs and a clean economy. We can and must have both. And over the last year or so, we have put out something we call the Solidarity for Climate Action, which is a bold climate agenda aimed at jointly addressing the critical climate challenge and the critical challenge of economic inequality. And as part of that agenda, we underscore the importance of manufacturing and competitiveness, and how rebuilding a strong, fair, competitive manufacturing sector has to be a central part of an aggressive climate agenda. Just a little brief, it was interesting to hear Robbie's discussion of manufacturing, and I think he spared me a little bit of time talking about how central manufacturing and auto manufacturing in particular is to the economy across a wide range of criteria. But getting manufacturing right is also critical to cutting emissions. And to underpinning the growth and maintenance of high quality family sustaining jobs. But it's critical to note as well that we can't rebuild prosperity if we fall behind the rest of the world in building the technologies of the future, or if working people don't see the gains from innovation or a clean economy. And as we're looking at, we've drilled down on this around the importance of manufacturing in a fairly detailed manufacturing agenda. But in addition, we have looked at what are the opportunities now in this moment in relief and stimulus around manufacturing. And again, as other speakers have said, the auto sector and EVs in particular are an incredibly important opportunity here, both because of their centrality to the manufacturing sector and to transformation of the transportation sector as a whole, but also because they are iconic as people think about what does it mean to move to a clean economy. People understand the automotive sector in ways that they may not understand other sectors of the economy. And so it's absolutely critical that we get this right. I would also say that the time to act is now. And it's not only critical from a domestic competitiveness perspective, as Robbie also laid out and others about the critical importance that we don't fall behind the rest of the world if we want to see the gains from a clean economy, but also because of the urgent crisis we find ourselves in now. Robbie and I clearly had our heads in the same place because when we were putting these slides together, because I think I was going to flag the same takeaway from, I think one of the things we've seen in the COVID crisis is that how important manufacturing is, and that we did go to the auto sector when we needed to address an urgent, national health security question. But in addition, the crisis has revealed, in addition to the strength and the potential of the manufacturing sector, it has revealed profound weaknesses in essential supply chains. We have seen how difficult, how critical material products, whether it's personal protective equipment or ventilators or even vaccines or the testing kits that we will soon need, how we have major shortcomings when it comes to making those here, having all the gaps in the supply chain filled. And I think it has flagged the importance even outside the health and pharmaceutical industry that we really need to think whether we are how we ensure a secure and a strong manufacturing sector, especially as we move towards as we look at how the nation can be economically strong and prosperous in a rapidly changing global economy. I think the crisis has also shown just how troubled our economy was, how fragile. And as Gina has also mentioned, not only have we seen how people were economically in perilous straits, how many people were in economically perilous straits, but yet once again, tragically, how entrenched and structural racism has continued not only to put people of color at personal, physical risk in in the actions of our government and our police, but through the impacts of COVID that just reinforces long-standing disparities in health and the economy. And so, not only from both a moral perspective, but also from a standpoint of economic effectiveness, if we're going to come out of this crisis stronger, we must look at a kind of response that will address some of the urgent problems that we have seen revealed through the crisis. So looking at overall relief and stimulus priorities, as an organization, we have looked at a number that directly relate to both manufacturing and the auto sector specifically. And I'm just going to very briefly mention them, only because these are things that we need to address right away and matter to how we come out of this crisis in this sector, as well as many others. One is that, as a first priority, we need to continue right now in the relief packages and in any ongoing stimulus, safeguarding working people's families and communities' health, their safety, their jobs, their homes, and their livelihoods. We have seen major gaps revealed in worker safety and the ability of our existing industrial systems to protect workers and to ensure that we're able to respond to how to put it. We've seen how critical our essential workers, including in the manufacturing sector, and yet how challenging are both their economic and often health and safety circumstances. We shouldn't, as we go into the period of reopening, we shouldn't have to. We're having a debate now about whether or not we can reopen and secure both workers and community safety. We shouldn't be having that debate. We know how to do this right. It has to do with investing, ensuring things like OSHA standards that are appropriate for the time and enforcing them, and providing the resources to both, and providing the resources, and not to mention the manufacturing, et cetera, to get the kind of personal protective equipment in people's hands, the kind of testing we need, so that we can both reopen and keep workers and communities safe. Looking forward, though, I really want to underscore, we often hear people saying, oh, we don't know what the future holds. It's true, there are many uncertainties about things like, whether a vaccine will be available, what's going to be the impact of temperature on what happens with this pandemic. But many things are under control. Whether or not we have a long, slow, painful recovery with that reinforces the economic and other kinds of equity and injustices of our current economy, or one that is rapid and far more rapid and far more effective, has to do with the actions that policymakers make now, including in this sector. As an organization, we underscore three big things, but and all of them have relevance to this industry. One is investing in infrastructure. Second, rebuilding public sector and services, and third, jumpstarting domestic manufacturing. And I want to jump right into what that means in this sector. We have a huge opportunity to invest at scale in manufacturing the next generation of vehicles and the technology that goes into them in America. And there are three kinds of opportunities here, at least, perhaps more. One is to fund urgent manufacturing retooling and conversion. Companies that want to expand, companies that want to shift to growing sectors, companies that have recently closed, but due to economic stress, but could otherwise continue. Second, reshoring or onshoring, sometimes folks call this, and filling supply chain gaps, as other folks have mentioned. We are far behind other parts of the world in ensuring that we are building the battery cells, the components, the electronic control systems, etc., for EV propulsion to meet all kinds of sizes and types of vehicles in the U.S. We have a tremendous opportunity to fill some of those gaps. Second, and finally, I want to follow up and expand on something that Robbie said about critical minerals. We have an opportunity to reinvest in basic materials production in America of all kinds. And part of that is about ensuring that our steel, aluminum, and other kinds of fundamental materials that we depend essentially on for all kinds of products, but certainly in this sector, are the cleanest and most competitive in the world here. If we fail to do that, we risk offshoring both jobs and pollution overseas. And whether we're looking at rare earths or lithium, or whether we're looking at steel and aluminum, we have a tremendous opportunity to invest in doing it right. I saw a question in the chat about responsible mining. We're deeply interested in a national, thinking nationally about what responsible mining, recycling and reclamation of critical materials looks like, how we do that in a way that is economically, socially, and environmentally responsible. But even in the immediate term, there's tremendous opportunity to look at new ways of recycling and reclaiming many of these critical materials, and to reinvest now in critical materials, basic materials production in ways that both strengthen production here and cut emissions. So to do that, I'm going to expand a little bit on the proposal that Gina mentioned about investing $20 billion or more in domestic manufacturing of these technologies. I would say that we have numerous tools to do this. Not only might folks talk about broader industrial banks or manufacturing, a new national focus on manufacturing, but in this sector particularly, we have proven tools which we could use right away. Those include both expansion of the Advanced Technology Vehicles Manufacturing Loan Program, as someone else has mentioned, both to cover a broader range of technologies and to support manufacture of technology that goes into medium and heavy duty electric and advanced vehicles. There is, in addition, a provision that came from the 2007 Energy Bill at the same time that we authorized the ATVM program to do manufacturing conversion grants as opposed to loans. We propose funding this program to provide grants to either supplement loan funds or to provide funding, particularly to convert facilities at risk of closure and things of that sort, as well as to establish newer, smaller companies that need additional funding beyond loan funds. And finally, I want to talk about, folks have talked about, there's a variety of clean energy deployment tax credits, but 48C tax credit is a clean energy and vehicle technology manufacturing tax credit. It has always been hugely popular. It has repeatedly run out of funding. Expanding funding for this program, targeting this and other programs at the electric vehicle supply chain, but in particular to maybe some of these critical materials or technologies where we need to build capacity we don't have today. Very critical. I'll talk in a moment about some of the targeting of these investments, but it's also critical that we look at reinvesting in the communities that need it most, including not only communities of color, communities that have been underinvestment or disinvested, but are deindustrialized and impacted communities. And so a real opportunity to rebuild manufacturing communities. And finally, here, there's a lot of related potential policy, including focused R&D, ensuring that our corporate tax and trade rules support reinvestment in manufacturing plant and equipment and in investment in workers and training. Second, and I'm nearly done, we have a huge opportunity to use our public investments to build a strong, clean, and fair manufacturing economy in the U.S. And that means, and we wholly support the investments that others have mentioned in transit and EV charging infrastructure, in ensuring we sustain tax credits in this sector. But it's essential that all of our public funds include conditions and incentives that support both domestic manufacturing and good jobs and high labor standards. Doing this is not only critical to building broad support for these policies, but it is essential to getting the economic benefit we want to see. Otherwise, the billions that we would put in here and rightly use to stimulate the economy in this moment and put our industry in a better place and our national competitiveness in this sector in a better place will be, in some sense, squandered if they go to undermining our global competitiveness in manufacturing. We must use these to support and strengthen our ability to build these industries in the U.S. and to ensure that that people see the jobs of the future in transportation as in energy being as good or better than the ones they may have today, and that they are able to build middle-class lifestyles with them and all the spending and consumption that we need to support a prosperous economy. Someone mentioned briefly other initiatives to boost demand, support industries. I would just underscore real quickly that we want to make sure that these two deliver both to workers, but also broad public benefits and are focused in a forward-looking manner. Finally, I just want to close real quickly with cross-cutting, and I've touched on some of these, some of the cross-cutting conditions, or how to put it. I guess I would call them style approaches that we want to look at across we often call this the how slide. If all the policies we talked about before, what do we need to do to rebuild manufacturing and lead in EV manufacturing and deployment in the U.S., what's the how? And we want to underscore a couple of things real quickly. We have a whole set of tools we can use to ensure that we are creating family-sustaining jobs across the automotive manufacturing supply chain. We need to use tools to prioritize investments in the communities and on the workers who need it most. I'm happy to take questions on this about what that means. Finally, we need to ensure health, safety, both for communities and workers in the industry. We need to invest in training and retraining and increasing and improving pathways into family supporting manufacturing careers. And there are some fabulous models for how to do that and how to do that more and better in the transportation sector. And finally, as I alluded to before, we have many ways that we need to ensure that as we use all the tools to promote the next generation of vehicles, that we are simultaneously investing, supporting the transformation of a manufacturing sector. And with that, I'm getting the 2 minute, it's now the 30-second warning, I'm sure. Thanks very much. Happy to talk anything more. And I would just close. I often get questions about robots in this sector. The automotive sector is one of the most robotics intensive. And I think I would just, in the same way that we're looking at that transition in the electric vehicles. We also we know something about robotics in this sector as well, and the difference between building a strong industry with good jobs is not about the technology. It's about how we act. What are the whether or not workers have a voice at work and a union, whether we invest in health and safety on the job, what kinds of trade and tax policies we put around a technological change. It's not the technology itself. And we have a huge opportunity to rebuild for the long term and at this moment in the electric vehicle sector.
Great. Thank you very much, Zoe. That was an excellent, comprehensive presentation. And a reminder to please put your questions into the chat. We're getting a number of them, but we'd love to have a whole host more. And now at this time, I'd like to introduce our last speaker and fellow, West Coaster, Matt Petersen. Matt is the president and CEO of the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator, which is also known as LACI. LACI is creating an inclusive green economy by unlocking innovation, transforming markets, as well as enhancing community. LACI's 3 priorities are accelerating transportation, clean energy, and sustainable cities. Prior to joining LACI, Matt was appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti as the first ever Chief Sustainability Officer for the city of Los Angeles. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you for having me. During these auspicious times that require us all to rise to the challenge in multiple ways and have difficult conversations about race and inequities in our country. And while not quite the same, we're here to talk about the benefits from zero emissions transportation in part, and just want to acknowledge and give a moment of pause and silence for those that have lost their lives due to brutality and other aggressions, and those that are taking to the street peacefully to protest. With that, I just want to really talk for a second about our transportation electrification partnership and speak to why we came together. When I was in the mayor's office, we really did a lot with Mayor Garcetti on how do we accelerate the move to zero emissions goods movement and transportation electrification. But there was still remaining a huge heavy lift. And sitting around the table when I got to LACI, which has got this incredible campus in downtown Los Angeles in the Arts District owned by the Department of Water and Power and the city of LA that we're the stewards for, sat around the table with Mary Nichols, Ron Nichols, when he was still with us, and the former GM of DWP at the time, and said, we need to figure out how we go further, faster as a region. If you're familiar with Los Angeles, it's a sprawling metropolis. It's not just the city of Los Angeles, which is 4 million people, 500 square miles, but it's also the county of Los Angeles, with just over 10 million people, and the region is even much bigger, of course. We have the two ports of LA and Long Beach, where 40% of all the goods in America move through those 2 ports into our country and across the country from there. And of course, we're the car capital of the world in many ways, traffic, sprawl, etc. So how do we really lead by example and come together across jurisdictions, across boundaries, across any issues that prevent us from working together more effectively? So we started this partnership, of course, with the mayor, their resources board, the county, the utilities, and then we invited private sector and labor and other communities to be part of the partnership as well. So we set the initial target of an additional 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by the time the world arrives for the Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. And then set, and I was in our first roadmap we released on the eve of the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco in 2018, and then a year later released the targets that would get us there to be able to achieve that reduction in air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the ground, sort of the context setting of what we're doing. We invite you all to reach out to us. Michelle Kinman, my colleagues on the webinar with us, who's running this day to day with me and our colleagues. And it's really an exciting place to be. You're seeing, multinational OEMs and companies being part of this partnership because LA is really, in the US, we think the leading edge, and it needs to be. We have to take responsibility for our own emissions and the transformation and move to an acceleration towards transportation electrification and zero emission goods movement. So that's the partnership. You can also see there's rail involved. Metrolink is looking to move to zero emissions regional rail, commuter rail, and AQMD and IBW, and some local cities as well as EVSE players in the space. So where are we now? I think I don't need to go really into all the opportunities. I think all the previous speakers really hit on this. We really have an opportunity to restart our economy, put people back to work, and continue the clean air that we did see and the emission reductions we did see in this crisis of COVID. So we've been having extensive conversations at the state level and the federal level about how we do that. And really, we need to get to high quality jobs that have, that create the opportunity for individual Americans that we need to be creating, as well as the infrastructure investment that needs to be put in place. So while the Democrats announced they're about to release an infrastructure bill, I think modeling what the framework they released in January, it's to be seen if it's possible, but we put our proposal out as the Transportation Electrification Partnership in April. And we moved early because we really felt it was important to set the bar and sort of point in the direction we need to head. And we were comprehensive in our approach. We really took a strategic, holistic approach of all the things that we need to do. And I won't detail it all here, but you can find it at our website, laci.org/transportation, to learn more about the partnership and this particular stimulus proposal. There's a 8-page document you can download, as well as the cover letter that went. And it outlines a number of strategies and investments. $25 billion into zero emissions vehicle manufacturing, assembly, and adoption, including cash for clunkers through a zero emissions lens. Charging infrastructure investment, it's particularly a big lift across this country. We need to put in place for heavy duty truck charging as we move into getting zero emission trucks on the road, or hydrogen fuel cell trucks for long haul. Public and active transit, how we create safer streets, and how do we get funding in place for whether it's Metro in LA or transit agencies across the country to support their move to complete electric buses. And wow, what a difference the experience is when you're a bus rider and you're on an electric bus, how much quieter it is, how much less rattling and noise there is, and when you're on the street and you have a home or a business on the street. It's a transformative experience. So not just for the emissions reductions, but also workforce and job training. How do we create high quality jobs? And funding we've recommended with IBW support on apprenticeship programs. And then how do we support the innovation? Small businesses, particularly putting funding into small businesses and startups founded by women and people of color who have a tougher time getting access to capital. That's critical, as well as the innovation ecosystem and clean tech startups overall, who are really moving to create solutions in that transportation energy nexus that is so critical, as well as mobility solutions, whether it's last mile, first mile, or other innovations along other current form factors and modalities. That's a really quick overview, but I think it's worth talking about for a second that we also have an additional sign-on letter, because that was just from our membership. We're now reaching out across the country to air quality agencies, to members of the Clean Cities Coalition, to startups, to major corporations, to innovation organizations, to really join us in this call for $150 billion in green infrastructure and stimulus for that we described. So if you're interested, please email myself, matt@laci.org, or you can reach us on our website. We plan to release this in the coming week or so, and then making an open letter on Medium that people can roll on and support. We've also seen what we've done inspire and encourage others. We had early conversations with UCS before they and the other organizations released their proposal of how the bold nature of our proposal and how early it went was encouraging and supportive, and we're grateful it's been helpful that way. And we now have heard from some in the Northwest that our proposal has encouraged them to create a regional proposal, which is great given that Chairman DeFazio is a critical member in this process from that region. And so we invite you to join us. I will also reflect on conversations we've had with our membership of partnership. Tim Ryan, a good friend of mine, senior member of the Appropriations Committee in the House, just talking about how difficult it is to get the stimulus package through this year. And in part, we're putting down the marker and laying the groundwork for what we hope is a new tomorrow in January, if we can't get something through. But if lightning does strike and the White House and the Senate decide to make a deal on infrastructure, we all need to be at the table. And I think the different proposals are all additive in the end, and we're finding ways to coordinate and collaborate with others in that conversation, and other members of Congress like Debbie Dingell and others we've talked to. We've also talked about how do we create a partnership that doesn't exist, well, not formally. Hasn't existed formally. Ohio, where you've got Lordstown Motors and then the Lordstown GM battery plant that's going to go in. In Michigan, of course, with all the automotive leadership and the electric vehicle leadership there. Of course, California and the leadership here with EVs being the second largest export in California, largely due to Tesla, of course, but there's many other companies, Proterra and BYD and others emerging here in the space as a major player. So we're excited. There's our contact information where you can get more information, and look forward to our continued work together.
Great. Thank you, Matt, very much. Very comprehensive as well. And we're going to go ahead and jump right into Q&A. And one question that I think is relevant given all the different presentations, and yes, please all join for the Q&A. And this question is asked by our Executive Director, Jeff Allen, but I think it's important at this time to ask this. How are all of the competing stimulus campaigns that you're communicating your strategies? Are you coordinating with each other? Are you concerned that there are too many competing proposals in play? How are you all reacting together?
Can I have a go at that?
Sure, Genevieve.
First, I think that you'll see across these proposals, there's a fair amount of common aim, so that they are not conflicting in any major way. We all are pointing towards the same goals of immediate, medium, and long-term investment that advances vehicles, infrastructure, creates jobs, is equitably assorted, and gives us the clean air and competitive benefits that we need. We coordinate where we can, but lots of voices is better. It's not distracting, it's reinforcing, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Having read through a number of the proposals, I would agree, but are there others, Zoe?
Yeah, I would second that for sure. I think building the broadest possible support is critical. But also, I think if we look at past efforts to try to boost this industry and similar ones, if we look at what other nations are doing, they're using all the tools in their toolbox. We're increasing demand, we have globally competitive standards, and we're supporting manufacturing and high labor standards together, right? We get a better outcome than if we try to do it piecemeal or we don't do it at the scale that's necessary to be successful in the coming industry.
Hey, Robbie, I think you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add to what Matt said when he was talking about, can we get anyone to the White House or the Senate, et cetera. And I really do believe that, we can't just preach to the converted. And we have this, it's not just a political opportunity, but it's reality. Like, we need to do this as a country. And so when you have the facts on your side, that's a good thing. And I think we just need to go out there and represent some of this sector in a way that really speaks to the moment, in both the political moment, the economic moment. And I think there'll be many more supporters. Look, Republicans now believe in industrial policy, so many of them. But when framed in the context of supply chains, China, and our future. So I think there is opportunity, but it's how we present it. We don't need to present it to people who already believe. We need to present it to the people who don't, currently buy into what we're talking about.
Yeah, I would just add, you will notice on our list of other organizations and where they're from, we're targeting Tennessee and Alaska and some other key states where you've got some moderate Republicans in the Senate who are open, for the most part, to these conversations, whether it's from a national security angle or jobs and manufacturing. And as important as it is to get them on board, we also need, of course, labor to help push our Democratic friends as well. That's really critical. Robbie, by the way, it's good to see you. I think the last time I saw you in person was when we did that simulation with Jane Harman many years ago. I can't play Energy Secretary or NSA advisor. That was fun.
Small community. Well, thank you, Matt. Robbie, since there's a question here for you in regards to in manufacturing, it's a key component. So if there's a couple others who'd like to jump in as well, please do. But from Tim Miller, Robbie, when do you think U.S. manufacturers will see EVs just as profitable as pickup trucks? Isn't that the key to them actually marketing them proactively, aggressively, and driving the economic industrial policy benefits that you describe?
Yeah, so I think the auto industry is at an interesting moment, and many of them who I speak to, I do believe that there's a different things pushing them. Like, first of all, this is a moment where they think they can potentially leap forward, but at the same time, they do need to make up and sell some cars at a profit. So it's an interesting, it's been an interesting 15 years. Now we're maybe at the 10 years, but I think that they, many of them at the top, really do want to see it. Maybe this is an opportunity to accelerate, but they have to do that responsibly. For me, the real difference when I started SAFE in 2004 and just watching the shift, it's not anything we've really done, honestly. I do believe that Tesla, Waymo, and all these private people who are their competitors have just woken them up. Like, I think this morning I read that the Model 3 is the number one selling car in California. Now, that's not enough to change what we want to do here, all of us. But they see that, and they know. That's why they put $300 billion here. This is about capitalism at its core. That is what they understand. And so as long as we can help them get over this hump by the infrastructure, by the money to retool, to all these things, they are willing participants at the moment. Now, I think you can't fight them on, yes, they need to make some money to survive in the short term, but there is a different world than existed when all of us were formed as entities, maybe not Sierra Club because they were a long time ago. And I think that's a massive opportunity. So I think we're talking, years, and it's figuring out how to make them our allies, which I think many people have done. But really, in this moment, people are going to ask them, what do they want? What do they need? Because they need to survive. And it's for us to make sure that we're part of their conversation as well.
Yeah, and one thing I would add on this topic of electric pickup trucks is, as many of you probably saw, there was an announcement a couple of months ago that the Rivian launch was delayed or canceled, depending on how you interpret it. And that's such a shame. I think a lot of people were really excited about that launch and what it would mean for the whole electric truck arena. And these companies, they make these decisions based on a number of factors. And if they knew that there was some certainty in the market, there was going to be some public investment in electrification of transportation, they wouldn't have made that cancellation. They wouldn't have made that delay. So the more we can make these investments in these companies, in these sectors, in these workers, the more companies are going to make positive decisions towards accelerating electrification rather than slowing it down.
And can I jump in here for a second, Jeanette?
Sure, Genevieve.
Thanks. I would also say it's important to, the question was, when will automakers see EVs as profitable as trucks? And it's not a question of so much seeing it as actually being it, right? Part of growing the market is driving down those costs, and that's where the RD&D comes in to drive down the cost of components and batteries, and where the consumer incentives come in to increase scale and to help increase those margins on the EV side. Because as was noted here, as an industry, the auto and manufacturing side has been hurt and is going to take a while to recover. So yes, there's going to be a liquidity crisis and demand destruction that we need to address in order to put that, to put the market facing in the right direction.
Thank you, Genevieve. And we have so many questions with just about 5 minutes left. So let's see if we can get 2 done quickly. One being at both the state level and also at the federal level, we're often asked about transit in itself. So the question, how do you see transportation changing as a result of COVID-19? For example, there's many people who aren't feel comfortable being on buses or trains or van pools. Is this being utilized to help promote transportation electrification in all components, all capacity?
I'll jump in. I think there's we have Metro, the Metropolitan Transit Authority in Los Angeles, one of the largest systems in the country, very involved in our partnership, and they have a policy mandate to move to electric buses, yet and $120 billion plus in transit infrastructure investments that they're moving on by the Olympics and beyond. And of course, the sales tax down and fare box, fare revenue down. It's really, really hard. And so the federal stimulus and bailout is going to be critical for them to just continue to provide basic service. Yet on the ridership side, there's some people it's just not going to be a choice. They have to get on the bus. And so how do we make that experience as safe as possible for them? For those that have a choice, we've certainly been working on mode shift as an organization, as a partnership, as a region. And that's going to be harder, but what do we do for other micromobility solutions that may be a fit? E-bikes are certainly coming to the fore. Certainly from an automaker standpoint, it is an opportunity to sell into the market. I think with COVID, dealerships were closed for a long time. Now they're getting back to business. A friend of mine's a dealer and said they're about 50% back to normal. This is before the social unrest the last week, but he owns one of the largest Toyota dealerships in the country, which has got a little different approach than VW, which he's got one of the largest selling dealerships for VW in the country. And clearly VW is all electric. Toyota still hasn't embraced that, but he's moving that direction. And I think it's an opportunity. I mean, I'd like to see fewer cars on the road coast in LA, but I think it's an opportunity for OEMs.
Great. And then how about our least controversial question? How likely do you think it will be that an EV stimulus package can be passed through this current Congress and signed by the president? Perhaps we can keep it to a 1 or 2 word answer. And why don't we go ahead and start with Matt? Why don't we start with you?
I think it's going to take lightning striking, and the Congress and the White House wanted to make a deal, but I don't know that Dems will give Trump that victory or not at this point.
Gina?
I mean, only if we all come together and really keep the drumbeat going that this is about jobs, health, climate. It's about solving a lot of problems at once. It's going to be hard, but I think we can do it.
Zoe?
Yeah, I'd be in the same the same bucket. If we could make this part of rebuilding a strong, fair, prosperous economy, we have a chance.
Robbie.
I'm more hopeful. I think you have to make it about China. I just think that anything about China and about rebringing supply chains back to the United States is where the Republican Party and the president is. And there's a tidal wave, and we're like a little to the right of the tidal wave. And politics is about riding the wave. We just got to nudge our surfboard as a little bit over and then jump on. So my entreaty is that we all kind of figure that out together. And all it takes is a few of these people in leadership that will, they're spending gobs of money. We just need to take a small little piece of that. And so let's get on the tidal wave. Let's nudge our board a little over, kind of a couple people who want to ride that wave. And I think we can make something happen if they do a broader package. That's the real key. And I think there's so much unemployment that something will happen.
And then Genevieve, a similar circle analogy.
Well, I thought that was a nice tie-in, Robbie. What with the water feature in your picture. I would say yes. There is a possibility in the context, I think, of the most likely debate would be an emerging consensus on the need to invest in infrastructure as a way to promote recovery. And I don't know that it would all be one package, or maybe it would be a series of items. Infrastructure seems the first likeliest stop. Nothing will be easy, but I think it's certainly possible. If a larger package moves, I think that this is has a great rationale behind it.
Well, thank you, and look forward to working with each of you to further promote both the strategies, but to get this into a stimulus package to help create jobs. And thank you again for speaking on behalf of Fourth. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Symbiot.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And as Jeanette mentioned, we know we had a lot of questions today, but we will be sending a recap. We will be sending the recording. So look forward to that from us. We want to thank our speakers, Robbie, Genevieve, Gina, Zoe, and Matt. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to get up-to-date information, we ask that you follow us on our social media channel. The handles are on the screen right now. And with that, we hope you can join us on June 9th for Electric Transportation for All, Electrifying School Buses, where we'll be joined by Bluebird Corporation, the Center for Transportation and the Environment, and Thomas Buick Buses for a discussion on electrifying school buses. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we hope you have a pleasant rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.